Welcome to our second week of reading The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. Let me turn this off. All right. Did you guys get the email with the quote homework?
I don't think I got the email.
No bueno. So basically the email, these are going to be going out Sunday evenings after the readings or by Monday a.m. It's just going to be a brief overview of what we read, a link to the playback, and then it has like a little bit of homework in it. The question was, what does enlightenment mean to you? Do you feel enlightenment is only for a select few? And do you feel enlightenment is something outside yourself? I would love to hear your guys' response to those questions before I give my own personal input.
So I feel like enlightenment. You said the first one. Do we feel like enlightenment's outside of us?
Yeah, that's one of the questions.
Yeah, no, I feel like that's within us.
Okay, and then do you feel enlightenment is for only a select few?
I used to think that way, but as I've gained awareness and grown, then I don't think that way anymore. I think it's anybody. It's for anyone. Anyone can tap into it.
And then what does enlightenment mean to you?
As I've grown, for me, enlightenment is just greater awareness, like greater awareness of. As I know now, maybe being more present in the moment. Like we're reading the book, The Power of Now, so being aware of like just who I am and like you know uh, my personal growth. Like so, for me, yeah, I think greater awareness would be quick answer. Right?
Awesome. Christine, do you want to contribute? I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
Hello.
Welcome.
I'm kind of getting over a cold, so I feel that enlightenment is something that is achieved, I guess, internally, like how you feel. At least that's in my opinion. Um, and I feel that that is something that everyone has within them, like the ability to feel within them. So, and then there was one more question, right?
Two more. Do you feel enlightenment is only for a select few?
No, I feel like everyone has like the ability to feel enlightened, like spiritually enlightened. Is just, you have to kind of get there, I guess, or like be open to it.
Mm-hmm. And then, do you feel enlightenment is something outside of yourself?
No, I feel like it's something within. I mean, I think it comes from within you, because I feel like you are the only person that can, I guess, I don't know, you like when you're in a funk, you're the only person that can get yourself out of it, for example. So I feel like it's something that's within us that we have to kind of like control over, or whatever, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's my thing.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. So, enlightenment to me, this is an interesting question for me. I very much didn't understand this. I used to always think it was for a select few, Buddha, such as, I never thought it was down to common people. And I definitely didn't realize enlightenment was internal until I really experienced it myself. So enlightenment has come to change for me the meaning by being enlightenment is just becoming so present and so aware of my own existence and my capability of shifting my reality to whatever I desire it to be. And realizing that it is within me, and exactly what you said, Christine, like we have the capability. It's like love, that feeling is within us. It's not within the other person. So we're in control of that. We feel that it comes from the inside. Everything that we're seeking externally is actually within us. So awesome. You guys all had similar thoughts that I did. So today we're going to go ahead and get started. This is being recorded, so you can listen to it again if you'd like to. We're going to start on page 14. So, what is the greatest obstacle to experiencing this reality? Identification with the mind, which causes thought to become compulsive. Not to be able to stop thinking is a dreadful affliction, but we don't realize this because almost everybody is suffering from it. So it is considered normal. This insistent mental noise prevents you from finding that realm of inner stillness that is inseparable from being. It also creates a false mind-made self that casts a shadow of fear and suffering. We will look at all that in more detail later. The philosopher Descartes believed that he had found the most fundamental truth when he made his famous statement, "I think, therefore I am." He had, in fact, given expression to the most basic error, to equate thinking with being and identity with thinking. The compulsive thinker, which means almost everyone, lives in a state of apparent separateness. In an insanely complex world of continuous problems and conflict, a world that reflects the ever-increasing fragmentation of the mind. Enlightenment is a state of wholeness, of being at one, and therefore at peace. At one with life in its manifested aspect, the world, as well as with your deepest self and life unmanifested. At one with being. Enlightenment is not only the end of suffering and of continuous conflict within and without, but also the end of a dreadful enslavement to the incessant thinking. What an incredible liberation this is. Identification with your mind creates an opaque screen of concepts, labels, images, words, judgments, and definitions that block all true relationship. It comes between you and yourself, between you and your fellow man and woman, between you and nature, between you and God. It is this screen of thought that creates the illusion of separateness, the illusion that there is you and a total separate other. You then forget the essential fact that, underneath the level of physical appearances and separate forms, you are one with all that is. By forget, I mean that you can no longer feel this oneness as self-evident reality. You may believe it to be true, but you no longer know it to be true. A belief may be comforting. Only through your own experience, however, does it become liberating. Thinking has become a disease. A disease happens when things get out of balance. For example, there is nothing wrong with cells dividing and multiplying in the body, but when this process continues in disregard of the total organism, cells proliferate and we have dis-ease. The mind is a superb instrument if used rightly. Used wrongly, however, it becomes very destructive. To put it more accurately, it's not so much that you use your mind wrongly. You usually don't use it at all. It uses you. This is the disease. You believe that you are your mind. This is the delusion. The instrument has taken you over. I don't quite agree. Is that true? I'm sorry. Is it true that I do a lot of aimless thinking, like most people, but I can still choose to use my mind to get and accomplish things? And I do that all the time. Just because you can solve a crossword puzzle or build an atom bomb doesn't mean you use your mind. Just as dogs love to chew bones, the mind loves to get its teeth into problems. That's why it does crossword puzzles and builds atom bombs. You have no interest in either. Let me ask you this. Can you be free of your mind whenever you want to? Have you found the off button? You mean stop thinking altogether? No, I cannot. Except maybe for a moment or two. Then the mind is using you. You are unconsciously identified with it. So you don't even know that you are a slave. It's almost as if you were possessed without knowing it. And so you take the possessing entity to be yourself. The beginning of freedom is the realization that you are not the possessing entity, the thinker. Knowing this enables you to observe the entity. The moment you start watching the thinker, a higher level of consciousness becomes activated. You then begin to realize that there is a vast realm of intelligence beyond thought. That thought is only a tiny aspect of that intelligence. You also realize all the things that truly matter. Beauty, love, creativity, joy, inner peace, all arise from beyond the mind. You begin to awaken. So we're going to pause here for discussion. I really enjoyed that. I highlighted a few things here. Enlightenment is a state of wholeness, of being at one, and therefore at peace, at one with life in its manifested aspect, the world, as well as with your deepest self and life unmanifested. Enlightenment is a state at one with being. And then I like where he says, you usually don't use your mind at all. It uses you. This is very true. Very true. Do either of you have anything you want to share?
Yeah, for me, I thought the same thing. I didn't know it was possible to quiet your mind or to stay focused. And that was when I first started learning meditation. Um, and so I've gotten a lot better. And um, even meditation, I've grown to learn that it's just a greater state of awareness, like being present, um, and not like wandering.
Mm, definitely. Like I know many people find meditation very hard, and it's usually the mind. They can't get the mind to just stop.
I agree. I struggle with that still. I mean, I try, and it works out for the most part, and I get better as I go. But it's really hard to kind of like focus, especially if you have a lot of things going on. And but I try to make time to just like separate time in my day just for that. So I guess that makes it better or easier with time. But I'm always in my head. Like I try not to be an overthinker, but man, it's so hard.
So
It
there's
is.
this
It's hard.
there's this yoga called yin yoga, and when you're doing that, you're supposed to get into the pose and just really feel the pose. So many times I've gotten into it and I'm just like, oh, but I could be doing this and I could be doing that. And why am I laying here? Is this even effective? Like,
Yeah.
and it's funny because the lady on the video, she's like, I know you want to be doing things and you want to be going over here and you're thinking about your day, but it's okay to be still.
Yeah, it's like when I do the like I listen Londrell. I'm pretty sure you've heard of his music. I listen to his music and stuff, and you know when he's like, okay, like, um, basically when the parts where they're saying just kind of take a deep breath and relax, and I'm here like I can't relax. I have to go do groceries. I have to do laundry. I have to go to my job and do this and that, and it's very difficult. But I guess when we get it, and it feels great after.
Right? It's like that, you wake up and you're like, oh my God, if I just lay, I don't want to exercise today. I'll just, it's fine. I'll just skip today. But when you wake up and you go do it, you're like, man, that wasn't so bad. Like, what? Why did I waste my time arguing with myself? Listening to that inner mind kind of.
Yeah, I there's this book I've been wanting to read or look into. I think it's called 5 Seconds by Mel Robbins. I'm not
Oh,
sure
the
if you've
five
read it.
second rule.
Yes, yes, that one. I
Man, I'm gonna
briefly
have to
looked
get that
into
one.
it. Yeah, and I saw the concept of like counting to five. I tried it. I'm not even gonna lie. I laid in bed and I was like, okay, 5 seconds, let's go. Yeah, okay. I turned around, put the snooze button. Maybe tomorrow. Horrible.
So that's interesting because that book is on my list, but somebody told me a different part of it. She's like, basically, because I'm like, oh, I'm so overwhelmed. I have so much to do. And she told me, she said, basically use the 5 second rule. Like, just go do it right now. Like, you have 5 seconds to get it done. And that, though, doing that, so say I'm like carrying my plate to the kitchen and I'm like, I set it down in the sink and then I go, it only takes 5 seconds to wash it. So then, so then I wash it. It doesn't work all the time. I'm not 100% there yet, but
No, but it's
No, the
great.
fact
It's a
that the
great
fact that you're
concept.
implementing it, yeah.
Yeah.
That book has popped up several times now in conversations. I need to pay attention to it a little more. It's on Audible.
oh, okay.
I didn't know it was on Audible. I try to listen to books on my way to work, and I actually just heard the one Attached. I'm not sure if you guys have heard that one. It's pretty good. I
Mm-mm.
read that one. It's really great. Yeah.
Listen, Christine, I don't need any more books.
Right?
I said I'm not allowed to buy any books in the month of July. I need to finish the ones I bought in June. All right. All right. So let's go on. Unless anybody else has something to share, we'll move on to the next section. All right. So freeing yourself from your mind. What exactly do you mean by watching the thinker? When someone goes to the doctor and says, I hear a voice in my head, he or she will most likely be sent to a psychiatrist. The fact is that, in very similar way, virtually everyone hears a voice, or several voices, in their head all the time. The involuntary thought process that you don't realize you have the power to stop. Continuous monologues or dialogues. You have probably come across the mad people in the street incessantly talking or muttering to themselves. Well, that's not much different from what you and all other normal people do, except you don't do it out loud. I mean, sometimes I do. The voice comments, speculates, judges, compares, complains, likes, dislikes, and so on. The voice isn't necessarily relevant to the situation you find yourself in at the time. It may be re- reviving the recent or distant past, or rehearsing or imagining possible future situations. Here, it often imagines things going wrong and negative outcomes. This is called worry. Sometimes this soundtrack is accompanied by visual images or mental movies. Even if the voice is relevant to the situation at hand, it will interpret it in terms of the past. This is because the voice belongs to your conditioned mind, which is the result of all your past history, as well as of the collective cultural mindset you inherited. So you see and judge the present through the eyes of the past and get a total distorted view of it. It is not uncommon for the voice to be a person's worst enemy. Many people live with a tormentor in their head that continuously attacks and punishes them and drains them of vital energy. It is the cause of untold misery and unhappiness, as well as of dis-ease. The good news is that you can free yourself from your mind. This is the only true liberation. You can take the first step right now. Start listening to the voice in your head as often as you can. Pay particular attention to any repetitive thought patterns, those old gramophone records that have been playing in your head, perhaps for many years. This is what I mean by watching the thinker, which is another way of saying listen to the voice in your head. Be there as a witnessing presence. When you listen to the voice, listen to it impartially. That is to say, do not judge. Do not judge or condemn what you hear, for doing so would mean that the same voice has come in through the back door. You'll soon realize there is a voice, and here I am listening to it, watching it. This I am realization, this sense of your own presence, is not a thought. It arises from beyond the mind. And we're going to pause there. And this is something that I talk about a lot with my clients. And because I did this a lot for myself, when I really began my journey of self-discovery, I did this through mirror work. I sat and stared at myself in the mirror and listened to all the bullshit that was playing in my head about myself from other people. And this is what I teach about. Like, one of the things that I am very big on, like, just really becoming so aware of those voices and making them shut up. Do you guys have experience with these?
Yeah, I do. I go through the same thing, except I haven't tried the looking in the mirror and telling those voices to shut up. Oh, I think that would be like really good. It's I usually write, but I understand the concept of the mirror. Makes sense.
Yeah, I have to say, I do the voices. I get into full blown conversations and moments. I mean, I'm a lot better at it now. I catch myself now, but before I used to, man, it just seemed like if something went wrong, I would have, and I needed to just discuss something like or just go over it. I would come from so many different perspectives in my head to try to come up with answers and just overthink things and just like it was just horrible.
Right. I definitely think, well, I know that I have done that a lot. Um, when you have an argument with somebody or you disagree, and then afterwards you're like still having the argument with them because you're like thinking about all the things like you should have said or your next comeback or this or that. I'm sure we've all been there. Definitely that. So it makes a lot of sense though, like when he says the voice isn't necessarily relevant to the situation you find yourself in at the time. It's usually from recent or distant past, right? This is the ego. This is because it's like when you're going to try something new, right? And fear comes up. The fear is only there because the voice in your head is going off of what was from the past. That's the only experience it has. So that's why it's like, oh no, you shouldn't do that because remember this, you failed or you got humiliated or you're not good enough. All those things. This is from the past. Okay, so the next section. So when you listen to a thought, you are aware not only of the thought, but also of yourself as the witness of the thought. A new dimension of consciousness has come in. As you listen to the thought, you feel a conscious presence, your deeper self, behind or underneath the thought, as it were. The thought then loses its power over you and quickly subsides, because you are no longer energizing the mind through identifying with it. This is the beginning of the end of involuntary and compulsive thinking. When a thought subsides, you experience a discontinuity in the mental stream, a gap of no mind. At first, the gaps will be short, a few seconds perhaps, but gradually they will become longer. When these gaps occur, you feel a certain stillness and peace inside you. This is the beginning of your natural state of felt oneness with being, which is usually obscured by the mind. With practice, the sense of stillness and peace will deepen. In fact, there is no end to its depth. You will also feel a subtle emanation of joy arising from deep within the joy of being. It is not a trance-like state, not at all. There is no loss of consciousness here. The opposite is the case. If the price of peace were a lowering of your consciousness, and the price of stillness a lack of vitality and alertness, then they would not be worth having. In this state of interconnectedness, you are much more alert, more awake than in the mind-identified state. You are fully present. It also raises the vibrational frequency of the energy field that gives life to the physical body. As you go more deeply into this realm of no mind, as it is sometimes called in the East, you realize the state of pure consciousness. In that state, you feel your own presence with such intensity and joy that all thinking, all emotions, your physical body, as well as your whole external world become relatively insignificant in comparison to it. And yet, this is not a selfish, but a selfless state. It takes you beyond what you previously thought of yourself. That presence is essentially you, and at the same time, inconceivably greater than you. What I'm trying to convey here may sound paradoxical or even contradictory, but there is no other way that I can express it. So we're going to pause here. Welcome, Jasmine. So I'm just going to do a quick catch up for Jasmine. We spoke about, we're on page 20 now, but we started on page 14, talking about the greatest obstacle to experiencing enlightenment, which is the mind. And stating that your mind, we don't usually use our mind, it uses us. Freeing yourself from the mind by watching the thinker, realizing that all the internal voices that are going on, becoming aware of them, and how most of them are negative. And then we just read, getting to that space of mindless thinking, no mind, where the gaps occur, where you can actually become present of those thoughts and interrupt them. So, have you guys ever been able to interrupt your thoughts?
I have. Like, whenever I get to, I guess, into like a negative pattern, I stop myself, which is something I started doing recently. Because before it would just be like an ongoing thing. But now I see myself kind of like getting into that thought process, and I'm like, okay, no, we're not doing this today. So
I have as well. I'll find myself in, I guess, really a kind of pattern because it'll be the same kind of thoughts that I have. And what I do is like I stop myself at the moment and do something to just make me aware of it, like but just by being present, just to try to break the pattern.
Yeah, I too also have experienced it interrupting thoughts. The more awareness I get when I'm in pattern where, it's basically reacting, not being able to control reactions. And so I've caught myself and said, okay, and then I'll just laugh it off, like, because I catch myself doing it, like, so it's kind of like this, an awareness now. So, catching myself when I react in certain situations.
That's awesome. So then you all have really experienced that conscious presence and that gap of no mind. Like, well, most of us interrupt them, but when you're so let's go deeper. Have you been able to get to that spot after you interrupt the mind where it's just like, oh, it's what he's talking about is like that gap that where there's no thought.
I have not been able to accomplish that as of yet, but it's something I'm working on.
I think most of us are like, if you're new to that, then it's more so like where he's saying it's going to be short, it's going to be a few seconds, like perhaps you won't even realize it, like, you hear the voice and then you're like, hey, wait a minute, that's not right. And it's like a split second where it's like your mind's like, oh, because the thought stops, because you're creating a new neural pathway, right, for your brain to not say that anymore. So the more you do it, the more your mind is actually going to be quiet, because then the voice is not talking anymore. It's not interrupting you. It's not discouraging you.
I agree that like my little exercise of being present in the moment has significantly reduced the negative repetitive thoughts that I've had.
That's awesome. Yeah, because he says right here, this is the beginning of the end of involuntary and compulsive thinking. I think that's when I found like I stopped listening to a lot of music with words. It was able to like, because like we'll clean and we turn on music, or we're doing something, we turn on the TV or the music or something, and there's so much noise, we're not aware of the thoughts that are just running on program. And then when it's still, like, you can hear all them, but unless you're making that conscious effort to like intercept them, they're still playing.
So one thing I actually started doing, I always used to love playing music on my way to work, and I've actually started sitting in my car in complete silence, no music. And honestly, like for me, it was just like I should be able to sit alone with my thoughts and not having to be doing something or thinking about something or, listening to music. And it's been a little freeing, I'm not going to lie.
He says the good news is you can free yourself from your mind. This is the only true liberation. So I think you're finding it there, Jasmine.
This is so exciting because I read this book so many years ago. I think I restarted reading it for a few months and I really could not understand it up until like now.
Right? I have so many books like that that I read, and then I was like, oh, this is a good book. And then I reread it. I'm like, oh, crap. This makes so much
Exactly.
sense.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, I read this one a while ago, too. Very early on in my path to enlightenment. And now it's just like, wow, I'm here. It's so amazing.
It is amazing.
All right, so we have enough time for a few more. I'm going to continue reading unless somebody else has something to share. Okay. So instead of watching the thinker, you can create a gap in the mind stream simply by redirecting your focus attention into the now. Just become intensely conscious of the present moment. This is a deeply satisfying thing to do. In this way, you draw consciousness away from your mind activity and create a gap of no mind in which you are highly alert and aware but not thinking. This is the essence of meditation. In your everyday life, you can practice this by taking any routine activity that normally is only a means to an end and give it your fullest attention so that it becomes an end to itself. For example, every time you walk up and down the stairs in your house or place of work, pay close attention to every step, every movement, even your breathing. Be totally present. Or when you wash your hands, pay attention to the all sense of the perceptions associated with the activity, the sound and the feel of the water, the movement of your hands, the scent of the soap, and so on. Or when you get into your car after you close the door, pause for a few seconds and observe the flow of your breath. Become aware of a silent but powerful sense of presence. There is one certain criteria by which you can measure your success in this practice: the degree of peace that you feel within. And then he has a pause here. So this is leading into what we were just talking about, really becoming present. But this is meditation. So when you're meditating, Christine, and you were saying how the mind won't stop, right? You then how to draw. I tell people when they're meditating and the mind is going, bring your essence back to your breath, right? Focus on you're inhaling, the rise of your lungs, the feel of the breath, the feel of your clothes, the floor, all of it. Like you're taking it out of the physical mind itself and down into the being, the body present. The one time I really experienced this, like I know I was practicing it, but the moment, when you have that moment and it just like clicks, like, oh shit, I did that. I was going for a walk in the neighborhood. This is probably like 2 or 3 years ago. And I was focused on the word peace. But that was the vibration I was trying to obtain. I was like, I am peace. And I kept thinking about what the word was and what it felt like. And then I just became so hyper aware of my surroundings, like feeling the wind blow, watching the birds, listening to them, seeing the leaves move in the trees. And then just, I swear, I felt peace in the air. And it was just like my whole body unified with the universe. And that to me was like, that was the enlightenment moment for me, where it was like, oh, I really like my whole mind. I wasn't thinking about anything. It was just being and feeling that peace. And that's what he's basically saying here, like getting out of the mind and really just becoming it. All right. So if you continue. So here, yeah. So the single most vital step in your journey towards enlightenment is this: learn to disidentify from your mind. Every time you create a gap in the stream of mind, the light of your consciousness grows stronger. One day you may catch yourself smiling at the end in your head, as you would smile at the antics of a child. This means that you no longer take the content of your mind at all seriously, as your sense of self does not depend on it. Enlightenment, rising above thought. Isn't thinking essential in order to survive in this world? Your mind is an instrument, a tool. It is there to be used for a specific task. And when the task is completed, you lay it down. As it is, I would say about 80 to 90% of most people's thinking is not only repetitive and useless, but because of its dysfunctional and often negative nature, much of it is harmful. Observe your mind, and you will find this to be true. It causes a serious leakage of vital energy. This kind of compulsive thinking is actually an addiction. What characterizes an addiction? Quite simply this: you no longer feel that you have the choice to stop. It seems stronger than you. It also gives you a false sense of pleasure, pleasure that invariably turns into pain. Why should we be addicted to thinking? Because you are identified with it, which means that you derive your sense of self from the content and activity of your mind. Because you believe that you would cease to be if you stopped thinking. As you grow up, you form a mental image of who you are. Based on your personal and cultural conditioning, we may call this phantom self the ego. It consists of mind activity and can only be going through constant thinking, and can only be kept going through constant thinking. The term ego means different things to different people, but when I use it here, it means a false self, created by unconscious identification with the mind. To the ego, the present moment hardly exists. Only past and future are considered important. This total reversal of truth accounts for the fact that in the ego mode, the mind is so dysfunctional. It is always concerned with keeping the past alive, because without it, who are you? It constantly projects itself into the future to ensure its continued survival and to seek some kind of release or fulfillment there. It says, one day when this happens, this or that or the other, I'm going to be okay, happy, or at peace. Even when the ego seems to be concerned with the present, it's not the present that it sees. It misperceives it completely because it looks at it through the eyes of the past, or it reduces the present to a means of an end that will always lies in the mind projected future. Observe your mind and you'll see that this is how it works. The present moment holds the key to liberation, but you cannot find the present moment as long as you are in your mind. I do not want to lose my ability to analyze and discriminate. I wouldn't mind learning to think more clearly, in a more focused way, but I don't want to lose my mind. The gift of thought is precious, is the most precious thing we have. Without it, we would be another species of animal. The predominance of the mind is no more than a stage in the evolution of consciousness. We need to go on to the next stage now as a matter of urgency. Otherwise, we will be destroyed by the mind. which has grown into a monster. I'll talk about this in detail later. Thinking and consciousness are not synonymous. Thinking is only a small aspect of consciousness. Thought cannot exist without consciousness, but consciousness does not need thought. Enlightenment means rising above thought, not falling back to a level below thought, the level of an animal or plant. In the enlightened state, you still use your thinking mind when needed, but in a much more focused and effective way than before. You use it mostly for practical purposes, but you are free of the involuntary internal dialogue, and there is inner stillness. When you do use your mind, and particularly when a creative solution is needed, you oscillate every few minutes or so between thought and stillness, between mind and no mind. No mind is consciousness without thought. Only in that way is it possible to think creatively, because only in that way does thought have real power. Thought alone, when it is no longer connected with the much vaster realm of consciousness, quickly becomes barren, insane, destructive. The mind is essentially a survival machine, attack and defense against other minds, gathering, storing, analyzing information. This is what it's good at, but it's not at all creative. All true artists, whether they know it or not, create from a space of no mind, from inner stillness. The mind then gives form to the creative impulse or insight. Even the great scientists have reported that their creative breakthroughs came through a time of mental quietude. The surprising result of a nationwide inquiry among America's most eminent mathematicians, including Einstein, to find out their working method was thinking plays only a subordinate part in belief, decisive phase of the creative act itself. So I would say that the simple reason why majority of scientists are not creative is not because they don't know how to think, but it's because they don't know how to stop thinking. It wasn't through the mind, through thinking, that the miracle that is life on earth, your body, was created and is being sustained. There is clearly an intelligence at work that is far greater than the mind. How can a single human cell measuring 1/1000th of an inch in diameter contain instructions within its DNA that would fill 1,000 books of 600 pages each? The more we learn about the workings of the body, the more we realize how vast is the intelligence at work within and how little we know. When the mind reconnects with that, it becomes a most wonderful tool. It then serves something greater than itself. And we're going to stop there. That was a lot. Do you guys have anything you'd like to contribute? So I liked here when he said, we become addicted to thinking, right? Compulsive thinking is actually an addiction. And that reminds me of, like, you know, when you have all these thoughts about what everybody else thinks, it's the victim mentality, right? When you're saying these things over and over again to yourself, then you start talking about your negative aspects to people. Oh, these bad things happen to you. It becomes addictive because then we find people or surround people who validate our victimhood. So we get stuck in that loop that we need that addiction fed from other people. And that's the attention that we've gained from it.
I totally agree.
So, and then where's this other? When you do use your mind, and particularly a creative solution is needed, you oscillate every few minutes or so between thought and stillness, between mind and no mind, right? So I talk about this a lot with my clients about getting into that creative space, journaling, writing, singing, dancing, art, all of these things, they help you get into that space of no mind. And he confirms it here. So like that, even that, like washing your hands, cleaning, these things, you know how to clean. You don't have to think about, oh, I gotta get the rag and I gotta spray the cleaner and then I gotta wipe. You don't think about those things when you're washing your hands. You don't think about it, you just do it, right? So this is how you get into that meditative state where he's saying become so hyper aware of it. Feel the feelings, the sensations, the all your different senses, the touch, the feelings, the aroma of it. And this helps you become more present. And then you're actually meditating while you're like washing the dishes or you're cleaning toilets, meditative states. All right, you guys have anything to share before we wrap up? All right. Well, thanks. Oh, Jasmine, were you gonna?
Well, I was just gonna say, like for me, it was like I've always thought about the ego, I guess, a certain way. I never had like a certain definition for it. But him saying that like, only past and future are considered important in the ego, like that just like brought some things to clarity for me when it comes to
Mhm.
the ego.
Right. I think you missed that one spot where I was saying earlier that um when you have fear, that's the only thing like the ego is going on is all your past experiences.
Right. Yeah.
I like how he says like the ego is always trying to project itself into the future, and that's so true. That's like we're always trying to do stuff to advance and get to the next spot, and that's like survival. But how many times have you like, you're worried about something, but then like you detach from it and you just start meditating and you're just like, it, even that's how manifestation happens, right? You're doing, and you're feeling, you're thinking, and then you detach from it, and then it happens because you just got into that being, that moment of like empty space. You're not worried if it's going to come in, which slows it down. You're right in that moment, and that's when, oh, see, it's right there, it's delivered.
Yeah, I've been having I've been having a lot of those moments, like honestly, where I'm just looking back and I'm like, really, what are manifestations? Like I just like I'm like I need to just let go. You get so like focused on what the one is that you forget about everything else. So
Yeah, and then you're always manifesting. So even if like you're like, okay, I want this, but then you get into the thought process of like, oh, it's taking long, it's not here yet, and you're still manifesting that. And those thoughts are more repetitive than the thought of, I have this,
Right.
right? So you'll have, I, I have this because you're trying to manifest it, right? So I have this, I'm manifesting this, and then it's like, it's not here, it's not here, it's not here, it's not here, it's not here. Oh wait, I have this. It's not here, it's not here, it's not here.
Right.
So
Right.
there's more of the negative ego thought than actually of that positive one, and that's
Right.
why it takes longer, because it's like, okay, it's in the queue waiting, but then you just flood it with all the negative.
That's exactly what happens. And honestly, I'm just realizing the more I like actually let go, like completely detached to outcome, is when it comes. And honestly, like at that point, like the timeline is like irrelevant, really.
Right? 100%. Well, this was great, guys. So I am going to send a follow-up email. I know my last email, you guys said you didn't get it. Just make sure you check your spam folders. And it's going to have a brief overview of what we talked about, a link to replay this if you want, and then a little bit of homework for our next week. I'm glad you guys are showing up and participating, because without you guys, I'd be talking to myself. So I love you guys.
I'm so happy to be a part of this group. Like I've always wanted to do something like this.
Oh, yay.
Same. Me too.
Awesome. All right. So I'll see you guys around, I'm sure, but I hope you guys have a great week. All right. And bye, gangstas.